yesterday's lesson, we started our discussion of integers, positive and negative whole numbers, including 0. We then went into a little discussion about absolute value, which is a number's distance from 0. Today we're going to look at numbers and their opposites. A number that is the same distance from 0, but on the opposite side of the origin, is called an opposite. Easy enough. The opposite is just the change of sign. So the opposite of negative 5 is just 5. And the opposite of negative 12, if 12 is negative 12, giving the answer away there. The opposite of negative 8 would be 8. 8 spaces away from the origin on the opposite side, on the positive side. And the opposite of 6 would be negative 6. Now there's an important statement here at the end that I want to make sure that you get into your notes. The sum of any number and its opposite, we call that additive inverse, is always going to be 0. So let's try a couple of examples. If I take 4, and I'm going to add its opposite, which is the additive inverse, that's going to give me a sum of 0. I'm going to show you on a number line. Let's see if I can pull one up here to show you. Let's see if I can get that to come down here. Whoops. Let me try. If I can get this to come down. Here we go. All right. If I start here at 4, and I'm going to add a negative 4, which means I'm going back 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. I end up at 0. So that's what I'm referring to when I talk about taking a number plus its opposite. Once again, if I start with a number, and let's say I start with negative 2. If I add to negative 2 its opposite, which is positive 2, once again, the sum of a number and its opposite is 0. From there, we're going to look back at that number line for just a moment. A number line can be very useful because it can help us take our numbers and graph them, for one thing. To graph these numbers, I'm going to find the number that corresponds to it on the number line. The first one here is a positive 7. I find 7 here on my number line, and I'm going to graph it or plot it by putting a solid circle at 7. I'm then going to do the same with 0, finding 0 on my number line. In order to graph it, it is a solid circle. Negative 2 would be right here, and a positive 3 would be there. I now have graphed the 4 points. I can now list them in ascending order from least to greatest. What will that look like? Well, the lowest number here was negative 2. It increases to 0, to 3, and 7. I now took these numbers that were out of order and found them on the number line to help write them in order. Number line can also help us to compare, because when I'm looking at this, a number to the left is less. So I can say that negative 2 is less than 0. If it's to the right, it's greater. So again, we think about something to the left is less, something to the right is greater. So if I look at 7, I'm going to say that 7, again, is greater than 3. And the statement is true. Okay? So using that number line becomes a tool to help us to not only order numbers, but to compare them. Numbers and their opposites, once again, here's that number line. I'm going to look at naming these points. We call this 0 the origin. So right here, where the positive and negative split, everything to the right is positive, everything to the left is negative. We find that this point here is called the origin. Point A, I want to be able to not only plot the points, but also name them. Point A is at negative 10. Point B is right here at -4. C is all the way here at point 4. D is at the origin 0. And E is toward the end of my labels here, which is at 10. So we should very easily be able to look at either points and graph them, or look at the graphs and name the points. Once again, we can now order these from least to greatest, and I'll use the letters this time. I'm going to say that the lowest here was A, the least, followed by B, D, C, and E. And there we have, I had them in order and then graphed them. Reminder, this is very important that we talk about sets of numbers, and when we're talking about integers, we go on both sides of that number line. If we look at that number line again, we know that my origin, vocabulary very important, is here. Numbers going to the right get larger and are positive. Numbers going to the left are less, and they're negative. So those are the key things that I want you to take away from today's lesson. We're going to get into comparisons next class. Until then, have a good day. And your homework will be to practice for tomorrow's quiz. Thanks.